Welcome to Ask a CEO Show. I'm Greg Demetrio, your host. My day job is CEO of Lorraine Gregory Communications, an award-winning marketing company in New York. The Ask a CEO Show brings you highlights of my guest's journey to the corner office and what it's like running their companies today. Today, our guest is Alex Theuma, the CEO of SaaStock, a conference created to help SaaS companies grow and scale. The conference was first launched in 2016 out of the popularity of Alex's blog and podcast. SaaStock has held meetings in Dublin, London, Berlin, and their virtual events coming up shortly. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Great to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me.
You know, doing my little research on you before we actually met online here, is you have a very interesting story on how you came to launch SaaStock. Perhaps you can tell the audience about the background, your background, and why you started the company.
Yeah, sure. Good question. Thanks. I'm CEO founder of SaaStock. We're in our fifth year of trading. Initially, my background is like 11 years in sales, selling other people's software. As I got to, I guess, my 11th year, I kind of asked myself the question: do I want to be selling other people's software for the rest of my life, or do I want to, leap into one of these entrepreneurial ideas that I've been having, for the last 10 years, but never been brave enough to.
Those entrepreneurial ideas are a bit of a freaking plague, right? It just keep floating around. I gotta bite on one of these. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Exactly, but I had all these regrets about, bringing, like, I thought about frozen yogurt in England, and then people came over to do it, burrito places, and now you've got them on every corner. And even I thought about, DVDs through the mail, in the days before Love Film and Netflix, right? But I never acted on any of these ideas. Right? But then in that 11th year, so what can I do? And I didn't have an idea at that point. So after all of these ideas and not having an idea, I wasn't really sure what to do. So I started writing a blog, which kind of, was SaaScribe. And the idea there was that I wanted to push myself. I'd never written a blog before. So I thought, I'll do one. What should I do it on? When I'm selling, cloud computing software. So I'll do it on that to learn more about it and become a trusted advisor. What I didn't realize, it was actually a terrible idea, because I wasn't a very good writer and I didn't know a huge amount about SaaS, right? So who's going to read a blog from someone that can't write and doesn't know a lot about SaaS? But actually I pivoted that idea very quickly to think about, well, if these are my weaknesses, that I'm a terrible writer and I don't know a huge amount about SaaS, why don't I get people that do know about SaaS to write about it, for other people to help them learn? And lo and behold, I was very surprised that I was able to convince these influencers, in SaaS, to give up their time to write original content for my nascent blog. And I think it was a timing thing, and the people bought into the why, and the fact that, let's do a community-driven SaaS blog to help others in the community learn. And something I've learned from being in the SaaS industry now, for these kind of 5 years, is that people are really open, willing to share, to help others. And it's quite a special kind of vibe. So we tapped into that early and started. I was then the editor, let's say, of the blog, getting the influencers to create this content. And we were putting out 5 posts a week, which was, I even got people complaining, look, you're putting out too much content, right? So stop emailing us, stop putting out so much content. But actually that very quickly, in 3 months' time, we got from 0 to about 30,000 views per month. And we had a lot of people saying, hey, look, this is really interesting what you're doing. We're keeping an eye on this. We're rooting for you, etc. People from all over the world. And so this was quite nice. So I was doing this from my bedroom, this initial idea. And whilst I was working my full-time job in that 11th year, selling somebody else's software. And then I thought, well, I'll do a podcast. I'll add a podcast to this. And I started interviewing, founders and CEOs of SaaS companies and investors, from my bedroom. And then what I found, that I was able to kind of get some great people onto the podcast, grew that audience kind of slowly. Then I started to supplement that with a Slack channel of, of members of the community. Then I started doing meetups as well. And so I had all of a sudden a bit, the drive that perhaps was missing previously to really, pull this together. And before I knew it, I had an audience, right? And then I was speaking with that audience, and they kept saying to me, wouldn't it be great if you launched a conference in Europe, to bring everybody together? And again, I thought, well, it's a really interesting idea. I don't have any background in events. So, there was a bit of trepidation there around, going ahead with that idea because, if you're going to sort of launch a business, you should be passionate about it and, have some experience. And I didn't have any experience, but I think I had the passion. So I took that idea. I did, several months of customer development before packing in my job and going all in on SaaStock, and I kind of formed the idea in late 2015. 1 year later, we developed the first conference, SaaStock, which was in Dublin, and we got 700 people from 34 countries around the world attending, and yeah, so that's where it started.
So you wound up having a very nice conference. 700 people is pretty good for a first go around. All right. So, I mean, that's a physical conference. People are interacting, everything. So now all of a sudden, here we are, COVID, right? And now we can't do that anymore. So you've switched some of your conferences to virtual online events. What were those challenges like, and how successful has it been? I know you ran a couple so far, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, no, I mean, definitely a challenging year, but I guess kind of, with every crisis, there's an opportunity, and we entered the year with a plan to do 4 conferences across the world. We had a 60% growth plan, which was pretty ambitious, but that was our sort of goal, sort of this year. And we would just focus on in-person conferences, and we've had again, like over the years, all these great ideas that we kind of put on the shelf, which kind of perhaps hurt us a little bit at the beginning of the year, because when COVID and the pandemic prevented us from doing any in-person events, and we made that sort of decision, we had no other revenue streams to kind of fall back on. So it took that away. So we had to pivot and pivot fast. And the first thing that we did, after a war room meeting of coming up with 7 things, 7 ideas that we could kind of pivot to, we chose one where we thought, it was the fastest time to value, fastest time to revenue, the one that we, with our skills, could execute against the best, which was online conferences, right? And it was pretty logical, but we went through this process and we chose online conferences. So within that kind of need to pivot, and from going, seeing revenue fall off the cliff, we were back to revenue ways, or revenue generating ways, within a few weeks. And then we ran our first event in June. We got 2,700 people there.
Wow.
But a lot of challenges, right? Again, like what we learned was, in that rush to pivot, first of all, I think our marketing messaging was a little bit off. We had sort of messaging which wasn't really aligned with what was happening, like globally, with the pandemic, right? So then we repositioned.
That kind of leads me into the next question I had. So in terms of that, your messaging had to change, your marketing had to change.
Yep.
Who is your primary attendee, and how are you going out to reach them, besides the messaging? But what utilities, what functions, what tactics are you using to reach your market?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so our primary attendees really founders of SaaS companies or SaaS startups, right? And the C-level startups and investors as well. And certainly for the in-person event, investors was a big part of it. So in terms of how do we reach both of these kind of personas, right? Well, over the years, I mean, we've been running the in-person events, which has enabled us to grow our audience. But we've largely done a lot of content marketing over the last 4 or 5 years, from that initial blog SaaScribe, which is no longer, because we put all our content on SaaStock, through to the podcast, which is the SaaS Revolution show, which is aimed at that demographic, on that persona. And now we've kind of grown, our email list. I think it's it's still, I think it could be better than it is, but it's around about sort of 25,000. You know, it's a good quality. And we've been doing, you know, community stuff as well, both online in Facebook groups, you know, other events that we do and smaller events that we do online and previously offline. So we've grown that audience, which we now then kind of, I guess, kind of nurture through our events or content, and that's how we grow and kind of reach them. Email marketing to get them to the events is probably the biggest channel where we see most success. So we do a lot. We spend a lot of time and effort on email marketing into that audience to convert people to come to the events.
Okay, and you found that to be fairly successful over time?
I'd say email marketing and word of mouth, and then the word of mouth thing is, you know, it's around the brand, it's around the community. It's quite difficult to measure, but we do see that you know what happens is you get a couple of people that have either gone to a SaaStock event that will talk positively, you know, about it to somebody else, or you know somebody will buy a ticket about to SaaStock, and they'll talk about it to their community. And start to see that kind of effect. So you get those influencers or those champions.
Excellent. So going forward, what's on the drawing board for you? And how do you go from idea to launch? I know you said you had no experience in event marketing or event planning or pulling off an event for that matter, but you jumped in anyhow. So are there any big initiatives coming down the pike for SaaStock?
Yeah, 100%. This year is like, it's almost like our rebirth, right? It's a period of reinvention where we've gone from being this in-person conference company to really taking all of our value online out of necessity. So first off was the online conferences. The next kind of iteration of our kind of pivot and our journey this year is that we're actually today, we've launched our community platform in beta to 200 founding members. So one of the questions I asked when we had to pivot was, how do we bring our value online 365 days a year that we deliver in these 2-day, you know, in-person events? How do we bring that all year round online? And so with our community platform, which is called SaaStock Engage, we're bringing our audience onto this platform to do their kind of peer-to-peer networking, peer-to-peer learning, bring them into specialized groups, investor matchmaking, and run regular weekly content on the platform as well. So that's kind of phase 2. Phase 3, where we're looking at building our own SaaS platform around connecting investors and startups additionally in a different way. So we're kind of doing some, you know, these initiatives, and that's our focus. So
I'm going to come back to you and follow up on that after we take a little commercial break, if you don't mind. We'll be back in a moment.
We want to thank our sponsor, Lorraine Gregory Communications, for their support. Lorraine Gregory is an award-winning integrated marketing agency, telling personal and brand stories for more than 30 years. They partner with companies, helping them reach the right audience with the right message on the right platform at the right time. Check them out today at lorrainegregory.com.
Okay, we're back with Alex Theuma, the CEO of SaaStock. Alex, when we broke, you were talking about phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of SaaStock in terms of providing investor connections, in terms of providing 24/7, 365 content availability for the conferences. Going to investors is a little bit different, don't you think? It's going to create a whole nother business model to connect investors and startups. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you think about one of the key benefits of the SaaStock conference in person was that we connect. We're almost like a real world marketplace whereby we bring startup founders and we bring investors together. Let's say in our Dublin conference, and we allow them to meet right in person, and they do meetings. And out of that will come some deal making, and startups will get funded, right? And deal flow will happen. You take that away from investors and the startups, then how do we help them? And how do we help them in this new normal where everybody's online and investors will need to meet startups online or do deals online? So we thought about that. What we're looking to build is a marketplace to connect investors and startups. So if you're a startup that's looking to raise capital, you can come to our marketplace, fill out your profile, look at, say, what you're looking to raise, what sort of investors that you're looking for, And the investors on our platform will look at the startups and review them, and then choose to see whether they engage or not.
That is very similar to an organization that I'm on the board of called the Capital Alliance. And that's what we do. We bring together startups and investors in the same room. We allow them to do a presentation, 7 minutes tops, and then hopefully there'll be some deals making on the side after the presentation. But with COVID, we've had to put that on the shelf. So we're going to get back to that soon. In terms of your conference, do you see it going back to an in-person event at some point?
I do at some point, but I think what the big change is that we will be a hybrid moving forward. So we'll do a lot of content on our SaaStock Engage community app. We will do online conferences because I'm a big believer in them and the value that it can bring, and it's more sustainable, more accessible, for our audience. But that magic of our conference in Dublin, where last year we had more than 3,000 people come from 74 countries.
Wow.
To come and learn, from each other.
That's amazing.
For a week in Dublin, and having pints of Guinness and dinners in the evening, you can't replace that, right?
No.
And everybody's missing that, and so we want to come back to that in October 2021 if we can. We don't know when we can, right? Okay. But that's the hope.
So listen, so you're all involved with this SaaS world. Tell me, describe a current day SaaS entrepreneur, and maybe you could also tell us what's trending in that venue.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a modern day SaaS entrepreneur really could be anyone. It could be me or you, right? And in fact, it is in a way becoming me, right? Because I'm going from running an events business, or let's say a services business, finding like problems and processes that need to come online and need to, let's say, and you can SaaSify, right? So from a startup sort of these days, most startups, or a lot of startups that we're seeing, are born as SaaS companies and SaaS startups first, because people are finding problems, whether it's in Excel or in their daily life, and they're trying to solve them, and then they put it into SaaS because it's such a good model and it's a great way to kind of enter. So really, I think anybody could be a SaaS, whether you're a developer and a technical person or non-technical like me, come up with an idea and find a way that you can productize this, build an MVP, and then take that forward, right? So any entrepreneur can be a SaaS entrepreneur, and that's where we're just seeing this huge growth within the SaaS industry sort of right now.
Any entrepreneur, any industry, any vertical, it's all susceptible to SaaS, yeah?
Exactly, yeah. I think every problem, every process can be SaaSified.
SaaSified, I love that word, SaaSified. I'm gonna write that down. You gotta copyright that.
We're seeing that explosion, right? And it's just a great place to kind of build a startup, whether B2B or B2C. Identify that problem, think about how you can make that into a SaaS product, and take it from there. And whether you go to agencies to kind of help you, build that initial kind of product, and then build out the team from there, if you get capital or not. But yeah, the modern day entrepreneur is you or me.
So listen, so you've been doing this for quite a while now. What still excites you about your business today?
Yeah, I mean, running my own business, despite its challenges of being a founder, it's very tough, right? But running my own business still excites me, still gets me going. But especially this year, I would say, because of this pandemic, which is obviously challenging, especially if you're in the events industry, which I am. I'm now seeing it as this, as I mentioned, like this rebirth, this reinvention period. So it's almost like I'm going back to year one after doing this for 5 years. And now I'm kind of creating again. Now I'm like, going back to these ideas and then trying to build these products up and get these new customers again. And that's very exciting. It's kind of, reawakened, me a little bit, I would say, because we had almost a mature product that we were growing. And now we're creating again. So for me, it's very exciting.
I think that's a challenge that many CEOs face. And when things outside of the business walls change, they have to react and respond and come up with a new way of reimagining of how they're going to provide that service or product to their marketplace. So I empathize with you in how quickly COVID changed the way we do business. So I know I've had you on here quite a while now, so I don't want to take up all your time. But in closing, I always ask the guests two questions. Now remember that the audience is CEOs and people trying to get to the CEO office. They're on their own journey there, right? So as a CEO, as a person, what is the best piece of advice you ever received, either personally or business? And what is the best piece of advice you would like to tell those people on their way to the corner office?
Yeah, good question. I think best piece of advice I've ever received. I mean, I'll tell you what, one thing that sort of, it's been sort of reasonably sort of recent is around the importance of sleep, right? And everything kind of starts with sleep, getting a good night's sleep, and how that can affect your productivity, your mood, you know, within the business, your creativity, and so on, right? And so I've recently trying to optimize for sleep, for a good night's sleep, which is still challenging, but to kind of help me through the pandemic and through the challenges, etc. And seeing that the difference when you have a good night's sleep versus a bad night's sleep, and the impact that it can have on you as a founder and on the business. So it's not perhaps something that is commonly said or talked about in terms of, you know, the best pieces of advice. But for me right now, you know, very important as a CEO to try and get a good night's sleep, because it affects, you know, how I run the business.
I think what happens is you're faced with so much coming at you from so many different directions. If you're not well rested, you get frazzled. The stress gets you too quickly, and you don't have the energy reserves to respond. So that's really good advice. And I'll take that as both your personal advice and your business advice, because I understand that myself. I'm not the world's best sleeper, but I know when I do sleep better, I perform better. So that's really, really great information. So Alex, I'd love to give you the floor and let you tell the people how they can get a hold of you and any more information you want to provide about SaaStock.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I mean, get hold of me either on LinkedIn, Alex Theuma, or Twitter @Alex Theuma. Go to SaaStock.com to find out more about SaaStock and how we help SaaS companies get traction, grow, and scale. So we've launched our in beta our SaaStock community, SaaStock Engage. Find out more about that, and we have SaaStock EMEA online, our next big conference coming up very soon on the 12th of October to the 15th, with some great speakers, CEO of UiPath, CEO of Figma, CEO of Zora, amongst others. So come and see a lot of CEOs there at SaaStock and learn from them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show. Really, really appreciate it. I want you to stay safe out there and all the success in the world.
Thank you so much.
So don't miss another upcoming event, Ask a CEO interview. We've invited guests from all over the world, all kinds of industries, all sizes of companies. You can visit the videos at gregscorneroffice.com for the full video versions, or you can listen on your favorite podcast platform and just search Ask a CEO. And don't forget, subscribe, share far and wide. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for visiting the Ask a CEO.